Hey everybody, Brant Merritt here, bringing you a special edition of the Unapologetic Podcast. We are in Dallas at the Southern Baptist Convention annual meeting, and tonight at our alumni reception for SBU, we held a live panel discussion on the Southern Baptist Convention and Christian higher education. A really enlightening conversation. We were joined by David Dockery, president of Southwestern Seminary, Jason Duesing from Midwestern Seminary, and Jonathon Akin from Carson-Newman University. They joined our own Dr. Rick Melson on a panel to talk about current challenges facing Christian schools, some real interesting history on the Southern Baptist Convention and Christian universities. And I just really covered a lot of ground, and I think this will be helpful and enlightening for anyone interested in the state of higher education within the Southern Baptist Convention. So my co-host, Dr. Jonathon Woodyard, was moderating the panel tonight, and I think you'll enjoy it, and thanks for listening, as always.
My name is Leon Worth. I have the privilege and honor of serving as the Vice President for Advancement at Southwest Baptist University. I'm also class of 93 along with my wife, and it's an honor and privilege as an alumnus to serve Southwest Baptist University. It's a special time to be there, and I think you'll discover why throughout the course of this evening. I want to welcome you to this very special evening, and I want to start first by acknowledging that our hearts are with Donna Shelton and the Dr. Joe Shelton family this evening as they are having the visitation at First Baptist Church Bolivar and the memorial services tomorrow morning. We wish we could be there to honor Dr. Shelton. I know many of us in this room were touched by Dr. Shelton's many years at SBU from 1972 to 1995. And he left a huge legacy, not only at SBU, but in the Bolivar community and in the Southwest Missouri region. So as we start our time together tonight, let's just remember the Shelton family in prayer as they're going through that. And let's begin our time by going to the Lord. Heavenly Father, we are so grateful. We have so much to be grateful for. We have the legacy of an institution that has touched our lives. We have so many testimonies just in this room of the transformation that has happened in our lives because of Southwest Baptist University and other institutions of higher learning that have had a heart and a passion for Christ-centered education. Father, we celebrate and honor that tonight. And as we do so, we do lift up the Shelton family. We pray for Donna and for her extended family, Father, that you would comfort them and, Father, that they would feel your presence and your love around them as folks come around them to celebrate and honor Dr. Joe Shelton. We thank you for his legacy at SBU and for the enduring inspiration and impact that he had on so many of us. So, Father, tonight may you be glorified as we talk through different opportunities and challenges that are arising in higher education. We want the name of Jesus to be glorified in all things, and we pray in his precious and holy name. Amen. I'm going to turn the time over now for our panel to Dr. Jonathon Woodyard, who is our Vice President of Student Life. Would you please welcome Dr. Jonathon Woodyard?
Thanks for being here. Super excited to sit up here with some of my heroes of what I know. All these guys, Dr. Dockery, I've watched and read watched his ministry, read his books. So thankful for him for being here. President of Southwestern Baptist Theological Seminary, not far from here. John Akin, first professor I ever had of preaching back when he was 25 years old, and the best class I've ever had, serves as one of the vice presidents, Carson-Newman University in Tennessee. And then Dr. Jason Duesing at Midwestern, actually oversaw my PhD program, and thankful for him and his help of actually getting me through the PhD program. So thankful for him and his friendship and help. And then Dr. Rick Melson, my boss, and all kinds of great things I could probably say about you, or should say, but won't right now. So thankful for this conversation. One of the things I have come to love in my life is Christian higher education. I haven't always been in Christian higher education. I was a pastor for about 15 years at different churches in Kentucky, in Indiana, and in Minnesota before going into Christian higher ed. and have just come to see the value and the importance of it. One of the things I had the chance to do this year was chair the resolutions committee for the Missouri Baptist Convention. And one of the resolutions we put forward as a convention was to reaffirm the commitment of Missouri Baptist churches to Christian higher ed. Missouri Baptists have they have a seminary, Kansas City, on the national level, but then 3 state schools, Missouri Baptist University in the St. Louis area, Southwest Baptist University, we're just north of Springfield, and then Hannibal LaGrange. And so Missouri Baptists have a long history of being committed to Christian higher education. SBU has been there since 1878. So Missouri Baptists have been doing this a long time. So we wanted to put forward a resolution for the churches of Missouri to affirm once again their commitment to Christian higher ed. That passed. I don't think anybody voted or spoke against it. But we wanted to continue that conversation on the national level and invited these men to help us think a little bit about Christian higher education. So I've said that phrase, Christian higher education, but that deserves some definition. So I'm going to start with Dr. Dockery, who's been in Christian higher ed for a long time, to just give us, when we say that, what do we mean by Christian higher education?
Well, I think I want to say what it isn't before I say what it is.
We should turn that microphone on. Yeah.
Oh. Try again. Let me say what it isn't before I say what it is. It is not merely adding a layer of piety on top of secular education. It is not just opening a class with prayer and then teaching anything that you would like. Christian higher education is an attempt to guide students in the process of helping them to love God with all their heart, soul, mind, and strength. It is helping them, as Paul says in 2 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 5, to take every thought captive for Christ. And that has to do with every discipline across the campus. And so the process of Christian higher education is helping students learn to think and live Christianly, shaped by a Christian worldview, and preparing them for helping them understand God's calling on their life and how they can discern that and direct their lives in such a way they can live to honor Him. But it is more than a practical application. It is more than functional piety. It begins with a life of the mind and taking every thought captive and learning to think Christianly. And if we don't do that, then it is certainly church related and it's certainly spiritual, but it's not distinctively Christian.
When you think about Christian higher education and Christian engagement in the educational enterprise, walk us through real quickly the history of Christian higher education in the United States. Have Christians had an impact on the higher ed landscape?
The beginning of higher education in America is thoroughly Christian. In 1636, the first institution is established as Harvard College with the goal of educating ministers, the next generation of ministers for the gospel. So they have an educated ministry that has come across the Atlantic and is here, but what are they going to do for the next generation? And so Harvard College is established to prepare an educated, the next generation of educated ministers, but also generation of educated church leaders, those within the church. So it's more than ministerial training at the beginning, though that is primary. At the heart of Harvard College is 1636 is the seal of the institution, which now says Veritas, which is supposedly a commitment to truth. At the time, now rather amorphous. At the time, a very full-orbed understanding of a commitment to truth, because that motto said Veritas pro Christo et Ecclesia, truth for Christ and His church. And that was what was at the heart of Harvard in 1636. Unfortunately, for the end of the century, the Unitarians already had stepped in and began to take Harvard off track. And so in 1701, Yale college is founded as a remedy, as a renewal movement in some ways, a response to what is going wrong at Harvard. So it did not take long for the school to get off track. Sadly, that's the story of Christian higher education in America, is institutions losing their mission. And you can go down the eastern seaboard, regardless of denomination, and almost every private institution in the country was established to be a thoroughgoing Christian institution, usually with a thick denominational relationship. But each one has lost their compass, sadly, along the way. I had the privilege of serving at, this is just a throw this in as a competitor, but I had the privilege of serving at Union University, many of you know, for almost 2 decades. But Union University is the oldest institution in this country with an active relationship with Baptist life. So founded in 1823. So in 2023, celebrated 200 years. As far as I know, the only institution in the country that has maintained a mission of some kind of faithfulness for 2 centuries. Yale kept their mission much longer than Harvard and remained faithful. But the story of Harvard and Yale and Princeton, down Columbia, down the line, is the story of losing their mission. And in our context, Brown, the First Baptist institution, same thing. They lost their mission very quickly. Same for Colgate and Colby, the next second, third Baptist institutions. And then you follow the path down institutions related to Southern Baptist life: Richmond, Wake Forest, Furman, Mercer, Stetson, all at one time faithful Baptist institutions, but not any longer. So our history is unfortunately a very sad one. So how did that happen? Well, it happened with the really beginning of the founding of the University of Pennsylvania and the founding of the University of Virginia, which offered alternative models for higher education to what had been established in those initial schools. So at Pennsylvania, you have a kind of warm-hearted Quaker piety undergirding all things, but with Benjamin Franklin's vision for thoroughgoing academic freedom and engaging the beginning of secularism at the time, Pennsylvania was not ever really a distinctive Christian institution. And Thomas Jefferson made sure that the University of Virginia was not a Christian institution, though he did want a morality to underscore and permeate the institution. But he established a school with chairs, and it was ingenious, really the first institution to have chairs in disciplines. So you have a chair of English and a chair of the humanities and a chair of history and a chair of business and a chair of law and a chair of medicine, but no chair of divinity, very intentionally. That was not part of the heart of the University of Virginia. And so it's really the development of the educational stream out of the University of Pennsylvania and out of the University of Virginia that has been the undoing of Christian emphasis in this country. It really takes off in the end of the 19th century when the general curriculum begins to change, and you have the rise of specializations and the rise of the elective system. And at that particular point, it is hard for most institutions to hold their Christian faith together, because not only do you have specializations and different emphases in what students are studying, now you have different methodologies for each discipline, which soon become different understandings of knowledge for each discipline. And so you lose this Colossians 1 vision of truth and knowledge all being held together under the lordship, this grand picture of Christology in Colossians chapter 1 that begins to fade away, and it is generated and energized more by the rise of specialization than it is by philosophical secularism. And I think we fail to see that sometimes. And that's still the biggest danger for Christian higher education, is how then to ensure that thinking Christianly permeates all the disciplines across the campus with the rise of specializations in our own world.
I think you can trace some of that, or read some of that. Marsden's Old American University. I can't remember who wrote it. Dying of the Light.
James Burchell.
James Burchell. Those two books helpful to trace some of that out. So when you think about all that history, Baptists sometimes have been accused of being anti-intellectual at times, and yet throughout history, Baptists have had a vested interest in Christian higher education. Dr. Duesing, you've got some knowledge of Baptist history, so talk to us a little bit about how Baptists have been involved.
Oh, yeah, well, some. I mean, tracking a lot of Dr. Dockery's path, I mean, Baptists are living in that same world. The difference is, when Baptists are really establishing themselves with any kind of religious freedom by the 18th century in this country, roughly. It varies from colony to colony as you're sort of moving down. By the time the country becomes a nation, they're finding places of various freedom, and they sort of settle in Philadelphia and then settle in Charleston, South Carolina, and different things. They do start Rhode Island College, which becomes Brown University. As Dr. Dockery mentioned, that begins to drift. But largely the early story of Baptists in America is one fighting for their existence. They're not allowed to exist as churches, so they can't give any thought to even the future training of ministers. So much of it is just grinding out an existence. That's the story of the Philadelphia Association in the 1700s, is just, can we band together as a group of churches to continue to persist? Once they gain footing, then they begin thinking about ways to train future ministers. But the beginnings of Baptist higher education is all about the training of ministers for ministry initially, and that's why you have a lot of these universities form and things like that. As Baptists form and begin to cooperate on a national level for the purpose of funding international missions, really by 1814. Then you have them, we're going to now have to train these folks who are going out, and they begin thinking about seminaries and things like this. There were other seminaries, evangelical seminaries, congregational seminaries, but Baptists beginning to form seminaries. Some of those Dr. Dockery mentions, but really by the time Southern Baptists form, 1845, you have them beginning to think thoughts about a national seminary. I mean, I could say more about that, but basically it all comes out of the root of, once we've established ourselves and we have churches and we're able to replicate churches, and we need leaders. We need to be able to train those leaders for future churches. We need to see them educated. We want them to gain a Christian education and also find the training for ministry that they need. That's why a lot of the Baptist universities first form, even before you start thinking about seminaries.
You think about this, John, a lot of talk about universities and things like that and training people for ministry. When people think about Carson-Newman University, Southwest Baptist University, Cedarville University, all these different universities, Christian universities we have out there, they may think, what's the point? We should just preach the gospel and plant churches. How does Christian higher education contribute to that call to the Great Commission?
Well, making the conversation more current than the history, I think one of the things we have to make clear, and is because people don't have a great doctrine of the church, is that the local church is primary, and higher educational institutions do not substitute for the local church. So every time I'm talking to pastors or churches around Carson-Newman, I'm saying, we exist because of you, and we exist for you. You do not exist for us. Okay. And so we believe the local church is primary. The Great Commission has been given to the local church. We can complement and support churches in that, but we are not a substitute for that. But one of the ways, like currently at Carson-Newman, that I think that we can help with this is, because we are an institution, I think SBU would be the same, that is an open enrollment institution that's different from seminaries, is we are a mission field, and we can train people for the mission field. And so that is true both of people that we're training to go into vocational ministry, but it is also true in terms of all of the, and as Dr. Dockery said, all of these specializations. We've got nurses and business people and teachers and coaches and all of these different things. We can train business as mission every single graduate we have to say, you're going into this field, and you're going into this field to be an ambassador for Christ and to fulfill the Great Commission. That's honestly why I left local church ministry and working at the North American Mission Board and came to Carson-Newman, is because I had the opportunity to do that with thousands of young people, to point them to this mission that they've been given, and to say, some of you are going to go into specialized vocational ministry, but some of you are not. You're just going to go into all these different career paths, and we want you to go into those career paths intentionally, trying to fulfill the Great Commission. So that's one of the ways that we do it. Other ways is that we, in almost all of our mission trips that we do, not all of them, but a lot of them, we partner with local churches to do that. We make sure our students that being a part of a church is something that we're always pushing them to. And so I think that's one of the ways we can help. Other ways that we can help are, we can provide resources as higher educational institutions that maybe some local churches would not have. So we can have speakers on campus, we can do conferences, we can do workshops, we can do those kinds of things where we can bring in people, bring the churches there, help equip them, and then they go out and do their ministry as well. So that's some of the ways that we're doing it.
So John, tell me a little bit about what you're doing there, and how do you not get in the way of what a local church is doing? You have so many things going on. We have so many things going on. And one of the questions I'm continually trying to think about is I want students to be plugged into local churches, but then I offer 13,000 things for them to be involved in. So what's that look like for you at Carson-Newman?
Well, I think so. One of the things that we changed, and our campus ministers here, one of the things that we changed when we came in is, like, literally it used to be the first thing they did. Now there's a couple of days the freshman students get there, and then they've got some days of orientation and so forth. But the first Sunday that they are on campus, we bus them to churches. And so we're intentionally, we have church fair at the beginning of the semester, have all the local churches come and say, hey, you need to be involved in a local church. I tell people this all the time. I think the number one indicator for your discipleship while you're a student in college is, are you an active member of a local church? And so we're pushing that all the time. Okay. And so we're setting that from the beginning all the way through their time. And so we're really trying to make that an emphasis. I think the other thing, though, is to say, again, where we're unique maybe from seminaries, like we have one guy on our campus who's a tremendous freshman, and he's leading Bible studies, and he's the reason why he came here. He was considering coming to Carson-Newman. He was also considering going to a couple of our seminaries, undergraduate schools, and he asked me when we were recruiting, like, where should I go? And I'm like, well, listen, I don't think you can make a bad decision here. The question is, what kind of college experience do you want to have? If you go to a seminary, then you're going to have to be involved in a local church and involved in the community in such a way that you're meeting lost people, you're able to share the gospel with lost people. Here, that's going to be a little bit more organic because you're going to be living on the same floor as people who are unbelievers. And so you'll get a chance to do that on campus as well as out in the community. And so that was, but that's something we're trying to push them to. The final thing that I would say in terms of how we don't replace local churches, again, we see ourselves as a complement to the local church. Why did churches, and why do churches now, I'm not talking about the historical, why are churches now starting schools in these local churches, in these local communities? Why are they doing that? Because they recognize, even in the best churches, we have these young people Sunday and Wednesday, maybe at the most, and those 2 days, and then them going to a public school for 5 days is not enough in terms of discipleship. And so we want them to be involved in a homeschool co-op, or we want them to be involved in a private school. We want them to be involved in Christian education because we think it's a discipleship issue. And so that's where we would say, look, we're not supplanting the church, but we are supplementing and saying we get to provide discipleship opportunities throughout the week. We're not going to compete with you on Sunday. We're not going to compete with you on these different things, but we are going to provide like ground war discipleship day in and day out, 24/7.
To connect to what Jonathan said so wonderfully with what you mentioned with the James Burchell book, the title is The Dying of the Light. And his point is that the light dies out on campuses. And the book is, if those of you who haven't read it, it's a history of the dying of the light in every denominational tradition, from Roman Catholic to Orthodox and through all of Protestantism. The one thing that they all have in common is that the light goes out when the institution becomes disengaged with the churches. Right. And so the way to keep the church I mean, the way to keep the institution missional focused is to do exactly what John said, keep the connection to the churches.
Yeah, so Dr. Melson, that's something that when you've come to SBU, you've emphasized being connected to the Missouri Baptist Convention, our confessionalism. Talk a little bit about the story and what you've tried to emphasize there at SBU.
Well, absolutely. I think each of us can probably tell a story of our own institutions of seasons of potential drift and or lack of alignment with their historic commitments. And I have a video I shot last year called Unapologetically Christ-Centered. And part of it is a reuniting of our institution with our historic faith commitments. In fact, Dr. Dockery, you were part of helping the institution realign with our Baptist faith and message. For a season, our institution had drifted away from the BFM 2000. In fact, in 2000, actually stepped away from the BFM. In 2018, we brought that back, part of Dr. Dockery's leadership. Part of my presidency has been restoring that as an institution to teach in accordance with, not contrary to that document. And without that guiding, clearly Baptistic institutional connection to the Missouri Baptist Convention, then we're tethered to nothing. So we need to be tethered to something. And we chose the BFM 2000, which is historically who our institution has been for our connection to Missouri Baptist, go back to our founding in 1878. So for 147 years, we've been connected, but not always as joyfully connected. So I can say with great confidence that by God's grace over the last 4 years, we've reasserted, reestablished, reconnected to the Missouri Baptist Convention, to the churches of the Missouri Baptist Convention, to the leadership of the Missouri Baptist Convention, and we're happily seeing change at our institution. Our enrollment is up. We are seeing changes in things like donors and giving to our institution that are headed in a positive direction. And I give a lot of that to our intentionality, and thank you, David, for your leadership in the institution and supporting us in that work. Because as an institution, in fact, it was Dr. Dockery that actually first told me about that book, The Dying of the Light. I read that book with great enthusiasm to learn and understand the history, which you heard so eloquently and profoundly stated. If we listen to that, the first thing we could kind of, I think probably for all of us, recognize is all of our institutions could take that drift unless we are tethered to something, and happily tethered to that. And I can say with great confidence, we've brought great people like Dr. Woodyard and others who joyfully connect, teach in accordance with, not contrary to. We have a very narrow gate to leadership. Jonathan mentioned that we're open enrollment schools, which means we accept students without a faith tradition. That's actually a historic position for our institution. Since 1878, we've accepted students with faith commitments and those without faith commitments, recognizing if they know Christ, we want them to help grow in the relationship with Christ. If they don't know Christ, we want to have repeated opportunities to point them to Christ. And I can tell you incredible stories that I've heard from alumni and even students that we've led to Jesus, even during the time, the opportunities that we've had partnering with and connected to the local church to see that fruits and those fruits evolve over that time. But without that connection, without that tethering, every institution will drift. And we've seen that. And part of us, we've all been part of institutions that have helped kind of bring some of that realignment back. And I can say with great confidence of these four brothers, of the opportunities that we have today in Christian higher education, there are not a lot of institutions like ours, but there are good choices there for your family as they're considering a Christ-centered, unapologetically Christ-centered institution.
So if you think about, if you come to work at SBU right now, on the top of the job description, when I got there, we changed it, even if from security guard to anybody else in my office, it says, do you joyfully affirm the Baptist faith? And the joyfully part, we're happy. And so joyfully affirm the Baptist faith message. So I've been so appreciative of that leadership at SBU. So let's talk a little bit about opportunities and challenges. When you think about Christian higher education, seminaries, the seminaries are kind of stepping into our college. They have, you got Texas Baptist College, you got Spurgeon College, Boyce College at Southern, Southeastern. They just renamed it Judson College, Lavelle College at New Orleans. So you got those institutions. You got something like SBU, Carson-Newman, others. There's a lot of different types of institutions. We have an opportunity, but we also have challenges. So Dr. Melson, start, and then all of you jump in here. Is what do you think are the major headwinds facing Christian institutions today?
Yeah, well, I want to start on the macro level because there's massive demographic changes that are taking place. Over the last 10 years, there are 15% fewer traditional students at colleges and universities across the entire country, 15% fewer. In the state of Missouri, there's actually 25% fewer college students, traditional age college students in the state of Missouri. So we're seeing a demographic shift. We all know about the Great Recession in 2008, 2009. There were fewer births that happened during the Great Recession. There's been a decline in birth rate since then that will impact us between 2025 and 2037, another 15% decline across the country. Some states will actually, West Coast, East Coast, are expecting a 30% decline in college-age students over the next decade. So that's something we're all facing. So that's kind of at the macro level of higher education. One of the things I do want to point out, there are about 5,000 colleges and universities across the country. About 1,000 of those have some type of historic faith connection. But as Dr. Dockery mentioned, the vast majority of those have drifted away from their faith statement. And I could probably say, and maybe you can help me with this, David, probably less than 100 institutions across the country would still be faithfully connected to their historic faith tradition. Is that too generous?
Not counting Bible colleges.
Not counting Bible colleges, that's correct, yeah. So as you think about college and universities, I think one of the reality is there's a lot of options out there. But don't underestimate the powerful worldview connection of an institution. And notice I didn't say biblical worldview because I want to tie that together. Every institution has a worldview. And when you choose to send your child or grandchild or sibling or spouse to an institution, or you go to an institution, you're choosing a worldview. One of the reasons why we chose to lead with Unapologetically Christ-Centered is we want to lead with and influence and impact a Christ-centered institution that's unapologetic about who we are and what we're doing. There are lots of institutions, one not too far down the road that has Christian right in the middle of the name, and they say the C doesn't stand for Christian any longer. And that's a reality when we're facing Christian higher education. So I think that's one of the headwinds in a pluralistic society that we live in, helping families understand, helping you as pastors and leaders within your community, your churches, helping guide students in understanding what type of worldview education. Are they going to choose a biblical worldview? Is there going to be integration of faith and learning in the context in which they learn? Or are they going to choose a worldview that could be undermining all the things you just supported them through K through 12? So I think that's an important one. The demographic changes will and are already affecting our institutions. Because there are fewer students going into colleges, there are currently 7 million students that are called NEETs, N-E-E-T-S. That means that they're not in education, not in any kind of employment, and they're not in training. The vast majority of those are young men. Those are 18 to 24-year-olds that are not doing anything right now. And I have a deep burden for that group. In fact, I think we all have a deep burden for that group of how do we reach the next generation to equip them, prepare them. But we have a changing world that's taking place. I was just at OpenAI this week or last week. There's massive changes that are taking place and employment expectations for our students as they graduate. Things are changing pretty radically and disruptive. I mean, technology disruption that's happening, especially with AI. So we want to, as an institution, continue to have a biblical worldview, prepare and equip the next generation for whatever sphere of life God calls them to, in whatever community and whatever leadership role, to lead their families, to lead in their churches, to lead in their communities, and ultimately to lead at a global level and prepare them and equip them for a global society. Those headwinds are real headwinds. They affect our institutions, the number of students going into those. And I think some of the things we have to think about is how are we preparing for the future and equipping our students and equipping our churches and partnering with our churches, reestablishing those pipelines and establishing a future for our students.
Yeah, I'll just say the population cliff is a major issue that we're all going to deal with. But I think that is a challenge. It's also an opportunity in terms of, I think the population least affected by that were evangelical Christians are having more kids than secular people. So leaning into missional clarity, doctrinal clarity is an opportunity for us to say, hey, we've got something unique and distinct here. And so why don't you, we share your same values that you're trying to instill in your children. And so we would be a great place for you to send your kids. I think there are cultural headwinds, and those are, and some of these things are still working out, and I don't want to get too far into the weeds, but like the Department of Education under Biden passed some things that are going to be challenging for us if Trump's administration doesn't overturn those. And then some of the Trump's decisions may have unintended consequences that when you attack Harvard, which I don't know that any of us lose sleep over that, or maybe some of you do, I don't. But that may have unintended consequences that come down the line to schools like ours. And so those are just things that we're going to have to kind of navigate and face. But those cultural headwinds. But again, doctrinal clarity, missional clarity gives us an opportunity to say the other challenge right now is just the rising cost of education. And people are going to college less because they're like, do I want to take out loans and go into debt in order to get this degree? And that's why they're going towards specialized degrees, because they're like, I got to be able to make money to pay off this debt. And so there's some who see a diminished value in higher education because of all those all those factors. And the challenge that we face, I think, or at least this is something that I don't think I've answered right now, but I'm trying to, and I think our institution is trying to work through, is people do not see the value in just a Christian liberal arts education anymore, because how am I going to pay off my debts if I'm a philosopher? How are we going to do that? And for us to be able to say, no, we want to train you in something, in these career fields, but we want to give you a Christian education that helps you think like a Christian and to be a well-rounded citizen in the world, and to be able to make that sell to people to say this is valuable. And that is becoming difficult. I mean, that's one of the challenges we're facing.
No, I agree with all of those things, but we must not lose sight of the fact that Christian higher education has always been first and foremost about preparing an individual to be a godly person and a good citizen in the community before taking on a vocational skill. What has driven Christian higher education at its best is helping students think about making a difference rather than making a dollar. And that has to be primary. But that doesn't pay the bills. And certainly with the rising cost, we have to, professional education is imperative. So all those things. But I've been in this work now. I'm starting my 42nd year this fall. So I've been around the block a little while, almost not quite as long as John's been alive. But I remember when he was about 3 years old. But I've never seen the combination of factors that are coming together synergistically to challenge the heart of Christian education like I see them right now. There have always been challenges, but there have been 2 or 3 at a time, usually one primary, but right now they're equal. And it is the enrollment, the demographic issues. It is the cultural issues. We've got legal issues. We've got issues of globalization. We've got multi-factor kind of things, the issue of the value of education itself. When I became president at Union University in 1995, the case I had to make was why Union and not the University of Tennessee, because you had to make the case for Christian education as opposed to public education. Now we have to start the conversation back a step further. Why higher education in the first place? Because the whole concept of the value of education is up for grabs right now. I was the first person in my family. My parents didn't go to college. Their parents didn't go to college. Their parents didn't go to college. So I was the first college graduate. But I went on and did graduate degrees. It was assumed that my sons were. We didn't talk about it a lot, but they all have college degrees and at least 2 graduate degrees, all 3 of them. But now we have 7 grandkids. I won't be surprised. I'll be sad, but I won't be surprised if one of them comes along and says, Pops, college is not for me, because that generation, we have to start with the whole question of the value of education. So it's across the board. It's a multifaceted, multidimensional challenge like I've never seen in the past 4 decades.
Well, I think to reiterate that too, the skepticism of higher education and the value of higher education, the question of value within higher education isn't just a Christian higher education value conversation, right? I mean, that's really happening across the landscape. I mean, even currently in the big, beautiful bill that's being discussed right now on the Hill, it has impacts. It could negatively impact institutions across our country. Some, like you said, Jonathan, unintended consequences for us. But for example, just changing the Pell eligibility. I was a Pell student. I was a first-generation college student as well. I couldn't have gone to college without Pell. Pell provided a significant part of the educational experience for me as a student back in the 1980s. Our students today, we have 750 students who are Pell eligible at our institution out of 2,500 students. So whatever that percentage is exactly. But, so almost roughly a third of our students are Pell eligible. The vast majority of those in the current legislation, the way this is being written, will not be eligible for Pell. And it's not because they aren't financially needed and eligible. They won't meet the criteria for that. Now, depending upon how it all lands, and it's not finished in the, we've been working with our legislators in the state of Missouri to support that. But our institutions are preparing and equipping the next generation, many who come from difficult socioeconomic backgrounds. And there are these kinds of things that are happening from a legislative standpoint with regard to value, that we need the support of not just the church, but also of our communities, and also from the work that happens at the national level. So some of these changes, and I kind of described it much like Dr. Dockery said, it's a bit of a perfect storm of all of these dynamics that are happening. The value of education was being questioned pre-COVID. In fact, Google will tell you among their top searches were, is college worth it? That was pre-COVID. Post-COVID has only exacerbated that issue. And now post-COVID the question is there. So I just want to kind of lean into what is the value of Christian higher education, because I think there's an opportunity that we have as Dr. Dockery was saying, as we think about how are we equipping the next generation of families to think about Christian higher education. I'm always amazed by how many families will spend money on K through 12 private Christian school and then send students to a secular institution. And I think there's a worldview question that every family should wrestle through and think through of what worldview. Am I equipping my students to go into a mission field? Okay, that's one logical answer. But I want to go back to kind of something that we were talking about a little bit earlier with regard to intellectualism and thinking about Christian higher education. Are we thinking about Christian higher education as a retreat? I don't believe it's a retreat. I believe it's a launching pad. Now, it is a place, sometimes I like to describe as a greenhouse. It's a place where we're preparing and equipping, helping them grow deep roots so that we transplant them into the world. They're prepared and equipped for that world. But it's not a bubble and it's not a retreat. It's a place where we're equipping the next generation to be change agents, to be world changers, to go into the world, impact the world for Jesus Christ. And that's not happening at your local university down the road at the state school level. So I think that's a really interesting conversation.
It's basic training, right? That's what it is.
It's good. Well, that gets to the opportunity piece. So I have two more quick questions for you to kind of end our time on. One is talking to you're talking to parents who are Christians and they're thinking about where to send their children. And I wonder what you would say. Is it wise? Is it prudent for Christian parents to encourage their children to look at secular institutions, given the hostility to the Christian worldview, the different types of things they'll run into? Is it wise for parents to encourage their kids going to the University of Tennessee instead of Carson-Newman, or Missouri rather than SBU? What would you say to that parent?
So what I would say, let me give one, I would just tell them, if you're going to do that, then you need to do it with eyes wide open and know that some things need to be in place for your child. One, they need to be a believer. Two, they need to have a strong relationship with you. Three, they need to have a home church that they're actively involved in. Four, they need to have it surrounding them a peer group who love Jesus and are trying to walk with Jesus. And if any of those four are missing, then just know what you're getting. I'm going to just give you two anecdotal examples real quick, okay? These are anecdotal, so I don't have any data to back these up. But they're on Twitter. This was about 18 months ago. I saw a guy who said he had sent his daughter to the University of Michigan, and she was in her junior year at the University of Michigan. And in those 3 years that she had been at the University of Michigan, she had been required to read one book that was published before 2016. Okay? That's not education, that's indoctrination. Okay? Second, I have a friend who pastored a large church in a city in Tennessee that has a large university in Tennessee. I won't say which one. A deacon in his church, son, was a chemistry teacher at that school. What he told his parents was that at a faculty meeting of the chemistry professors, that the chair or the dean or whoever said, we're going to go around the table today, and I want you to tell the two most important things that you're trying to instill in our students. And they went around the room, and we get to one of the professors, and his answer, this is a chemistry professor, said, the most important thing I'm trying to teach my students is to vote for the right person. Okay? So what I'm telling you is I don't even think that Christian education in general is a massive issue in the United States of America. Like giving an actual education. and giving one that has like real values and that comes from a Christian perspective is incredibly unique. And so I would just say, if you want an education instead of indoctrination, then you should send your kids to a Christian school. I know I'm biased. I understand that. If you're not going to do that, I think you need to go in eyes wide open to what they're going to get.
Others, Dr. Duesing, would you have anything to say to?
Well, I mean,
parents?
my little sliver here is very different than the other people's experience in here. In that, at Midwestern Seminary and Spurgeon College, we're looking for the young men and women who feel called to ministry. That's what Spurgeon College. Spurgeon College is like a young seminary, and then Midwestern Seminaries. So it's a total different segment. We do experience all these same headwinds, but in some ways, I just see those as disruptors that come along all the time throughout the history of Christianity. And it's actually a time of incredible opportunity for any school to innovate and to think through things. Sometimes schools they're these huge battleships and they cannot turn on a dime because of all these entanglements and all these types of things. But if a school can begin to move and to turn on a dime and is willing to think outside the box and do things a little bit differently in terms of even how does an enrollment shape up to come together and what is the future class, it's a phenomenal time to think differently. And you can talk about ways in which online education can actually be a positive for local church engagement and other things like this. But for our little sliver of people who feel called to ministry, whether that's an 18-year-old or a 32-year-old, I actually think the time we're living right now is incredible. And if many of you I know many of you work with Christian young people or observing the Gen Z and younger. I mean, there's phenomenal things happening among young people in this country right now, and really all around the world, that I'm actually incredibly optimistic to see, especially from a seminary perspective, that these young men and women who are coming to Christ are many of them are going to be called to ministry, and they're going to need to be trained. And if we can kind of weather these storms that are happening right now, I'm actually optimistic that what's coming is going to be a phenomenal time. And but again, my little world is all about people called ministry, not broader. So.
Well, I think to emphasize, too, the institutions that are leaning into their Christian identity are actually growing. Yes. And I think that's the positive affirmation of what we're speaking of here today. Those institutions that are trying to be in the messy middle or have drifted to the left are actually declining. They're dying. It's part of the dying of the light. It's part of the dying of the institution. The few that continue to grow, maybe because of big endowments or those kinds of things, are becoming outliers and anomalies. So I think for us and the kind of institution that we serve and the population we serve, I think you can be encouraged that our institutions are growing. And I also just want to say, if you're in a community or you're in a church that has a college community, whether it's a Christian school or a university, I actually see pastors from the church that I serve, that I'm a part of. We're part of a church that actually is designed to reach college students that starts with Missouri State University. So right down the road, 35 minutes from our campus is Missouri State University. We have about 1,000 students who come to our church. 100 of them come from SBU. They drive 30 minutes to be there. We're trying to reach college students. So I want to encourage you to do the same thing. I think Jonathan's list is super helpful of preparing students who choose that. I know, David, you and I both went to undergrads at state schools, and there are many students that will come out of your churches who will do the same. So equipping them, having that, I think, good wisdom and preparing them, but then partnering as a church in your community. And how can you reach college students? Because they are the students that are going to impact the world for Christ or going to impact the world. So let's set them on the right trajectory to make the biggest impact for Christ in a global society and around the world.
Can I say one more thing practical on that? Let me just say, maybe a bit, try to be a little bit fun here. Another thing that I think we need to think through about where you send your kids to school is, I can tell you hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of couples that come back for homecoming and so forth who met at Carson-Newman. And I heard somebody say this a couple years ago. I can't remember who said it. Like, in the West, we don't do arranged marriages. Although as my daughters get older, I'm kind of like for it, you know. But we kind of practically do some degree of arranged marriages, because where you choose to live, where you choose to go to church, like the community that you choose to be, at least limits. I mean, I know we live in a global world and you can meet people online, but it does really limit in a lot of ways the people that your kids are going to come into contact with and so forth. And so I think just at a practical level of who do you want their friend group to be long term, like that they're creating these friendships that are going to last, who you want them to marry, like the pool of courtship, so to speak. I think that's something else to really take into to mind?
SBU is Southwest Bridal University.
Yeah, I mean,
And
It's-
winning by spring, you know.
Absolutely.
I did last weekend. I did 2 weddings. One on Saturday, one on Monday. Kids getting married all the time. We love it. Yeah. So, real quickly, just one thing. Talking to people in the room, I would assume care about Christian higher education. So, how can they support Christian institutions? Just real quickly, a couple things. Each one.
Well, there's several things. One, I'd like to say, those in the room, particularly since this is a Southwest Baptist event, that you should support Southwest Baptist University and have great confidence in doing so. I love the direction the school is moving. I've known Rick Melson since he came to Southern Seminary in 1992 as an entering student, and so I've watched him develop, and I'm grateful for his leadership and the kind of people he's bringing around him. So I would say invest in Southwest Baptist University is a good thing to do. But what else can you do? You can pray. I think, pray for Christian higher education. It is a challenging context. It's a challenging world. You've heard about the opportunities. I'm with Dr. Duesing. I'm hopeful for the future. I think there are some wonderful things coming, but the challenges are nevertheless very, very real, and they are multi-directional. So please pray for God's wisdom and guidance. 2, you can give. You can support. I mean, I don't want you to not support your local church, but the next best thing I can think of after the local church is to invest in Christian higher education and to think about strategic ways that you might be able to do that. And thirdly, I think, is to encourage students to think about, that all these students, 15, 16, 17, 18 years old, thinking about life decisions, point them to a faithful, Christ-centered institution that's going to honor the Word of God, extend the gospel, and serve the church.
I can't improve on that list, but I would let me piggyback on it. I know, at least at SBU and Carson-Newman, if we want churches, we want pastors, we want churches, we want youth groups to come to campus, come to a football game, come to a basketball game. Let us show you around campus. The same thing would go with our seminaries. I know if you can go to campus, see what God is doing there, see the students there and the vibrant life, then that will help you pray more effectively. That will help you want to give and make sure that CP dollars are going to that. And I think that will help encourage you. We want to encourage our students to go there. So if you can, go get on campus and see the good things that God's doing and really, be an encouragement to our schools.
Of course, would agree with both of those, especially about going to visit campuses. Just parenting kids who are college age or who are preparing for college is one of the most challenging stages of parenthood I've found. And so when you are in that stage or you're getting through that stage, what you find is everyone who's coming up behind you now is sort of seeking you. So take advantage of that. And I would invest in a school. You can't invest in them all. You're not going to be called to serve on all of them. And so for many of you in the room, that is Southwest Baptist University. My kids own private Christian school in Kansas City. 7 out of 10 of the recent graduated class are all headed to SBU. And because of what it provides and all the things that it offers. So, around that, I'm doing rough math, but not a huge class, but it's something like it was over 60% for sure, are all headed to SBU. And so, pick a school that you're connected to that you would find it easy to talk to others about and just share your own experience in walking through that. And then find some way to get involved beyond just sending your kids off to that place. This generation I found is more actually welcome. Maybe they're used to helicopter parenting or something like this, but they're happy for the parents to show up and to come around. And so find some way of knowing what's going on at that school, staying invested. That'll just make the conversations you have with other parents so much more easier. Well, here's what we did. You all should go check it out, or come with us the next time we're going down there, something like that.
Yeah, I think just to reiterate what's been said, and first of all, thank you all for being here, because this is an opportunity you have to be on the forefront of thinking about Christian higher education, your own experience. If you're an alum from any of these institutions, I look around. One of the the exciting things about being a university president is to see those who have come to your institution and where God has taken them and where they are serving around the world. Previous president at our institution said, the sun never sets on a Bearcat, so we're the SBU Bearcats. And that's true. I mean, there are literally there are graduates, 50,000 graduates all across the world. And I see some of you in here that I know, and you're serving in places and you're impacting at Christian institutions, at other institutions, at churches, and in your communities. And that gives us great joy, because that's a great heritage and legacy that we can all enjoy. As we think about the future, that partnership, I think, is so important. And collaboration. You know, one of the reasons we want to have this event is not to be siloed and isolated in the world that we are in, but to collaborate together. We can't do everything at SBU. We want to partner with these institutions and other institutions that are like-minded, that are committed to the same faith commitments, that have the same unapologetic, Christ-centered commitments, that we can say together, we link arms together, because we want to impact state by state, country by country, around the world, to further the Great Commission and the work that we're doing. And that's why we exist. That's our mission. I mean, as a Christ-centered, caring academic community, we're preparing servant leaders to go into the world to make a difference in the world. That's why we are here. That's why we exist. And we want the future generations. You know, I'm privileged to be at an institution that's 147 years old. That's pretty incredible. David, I was thinking about 200 years. I remember just a couple years ago, you were able to go back to Union, celebrate 200-year anniversary of faithfulness. We want to be faithful. One of the things I say in 2028, we're going to celebrate our sesquicentennial, our 150th anniversary. And we feel that God has placed us here for such a time as this to set the trajectory for the next 150 years, that unless the Lord comes sooner, that our institution will be faithful for another 150 years. So may that be true, and maybe that's just a good place to end.
That's a great place to end.
Unless you had another question.
I don't have another question. I really appreciate these men. One of the things I'm very excited about, we talk about, we're not merely trying to grant degrees. Education is not merely about vocation, but formation. We're trying to raise up a certain type of person to go out in the world and make a difference for Jesus. And I'm thrilled to watch these guys do it at a lot of different places, whether it's Texas or Kansas City, Tennessee, and to link arms with such guys to do it. And thankful for all of you being here. So can you just give them a hand for all their time? So, brothers, thank you. I'm going to dismiss them and let them go to their next things. And Leon is going to come back up, I think, right? Okay, so I'm going to turn it over to you.
Well, yeah, I think just again, thanking you all for being here. If you are SBU alumni, I just want to encourage you, whether you've been connected with the institution recently or not, come, as Jonathon mentioned, come back and visit your alma mater. Come back home. Ronnie Kurtz, I know we had you just come and speak in chapel recently. Ronnie said he hadn't been back for a number of years. And I think it's encouraging when you go back to the campus, which you spent 4 years there. Some of you met your spouses there. Your life was transformed and changed there. Go back and see what's happening there. I think you'd be super encouraged. If you're SBU alumni, parents, or friends, we just started a brand new campus master plan. So there's opportunity for us to talk about that, share that with you, partner with us in the work that we're doing. May God be glorified in all of that. May we find great joy and satisfaction in him for his glory and our joy. Thank you for being here.